I do want to talk a little bit about what happened after you made some of these decisions. It's easy to watch the film and be like, yeah, that's clear. But as you're experiencing it, there's so many more conversations.
What I was experiencing was just kind of that wrestling match in my life. And I think many of us go through that in different ways.
You kind of go through all this stuff and trying to, whether it's make money or identity or feel good, and you realize like, oh, this is my calling.
A lot of times we'll hear "come as you are." It's important for all of us to understand that like we're not too far from God.
That really is key, isn't it? Like it's not half-hearted.
Rooahk. Welcome to the Rooahk Podcast, where we dive deeper into the ideas behind the films. We bring on subject matter experts and the real-life characters to pull back the curtain on the creation of each story. And just like the films, our prayer is that these conversations would be spirit-led and engage, inform, and inspire, no matter where you are on your journey. Watch the corresponding film for this episode on the Rooahk YouTube channel, and now join us as we continue the story. Welcome to Season 2 of the Rooahk Podcast.
Season 2.
Sponsored by Faith Ministries. Mm-hmm. We're really excited to dive in. Today we have Jacob Byrd, who is the story subject for Jealous. And Jacob's dialing in remotely today from Texas. And Jacob, how has that been? You're in Texas now.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on, Nate and Carl. And it's been great to get to know both of you a little bit better. And it's been a really long and exciting journey.
It has. How long has it been?
Oh, man. Maybe, like a
year and a half?
A year. Yeah.
2 years, maybe? Almost?
It might be coming up on 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how long these things kind of get stretched out.
Yes. But Carl, as I shared with you, just it feels really good to have your story shared and shared in such an authentic and powerful way. And so I really appreciate all the work and effort that you put into such an amazing story. Texas, it's been great so far. This week here in February, it's been 80 degrees. So really enjoying the weather and much different from Ohio, but it's been good so far.
Yeah. I did peek at the weather, and there's a 40-degree difference for the high today. It's 34 is the high here in Michigan and 74 today. So that does sound pretty nice right now.
You're wearing short sleeves. You've got like a hoodie and a flannel on. And
But I was curious, what was it like to see a actor, portraying your story? Because I know we talked about having you participate and act, and we've done some of that. But in the end, we kind of decided that, just based on availability and time, that having an actor portrayal makes sense. I felt like that would be weird for me. What was that experience like watching that? And I know you said it was cool to see your story, but just curious about how that was.
Yeah. Really, even before we started this project, I felt like God has really done a miracle in my life and has healed me from some really difficult things. And so I've never really felt like it's my story necessarily. I feel like it's what God has done in and through me. And I'm grateful for that. So when Carl brought up the idea of an actor playing my role, I felt a peace with that. And after watching the final product, I felt like it was probably important for my voice and my words to be sharing the story, being that I lived it. But I felt like the actor did a great job, and it really wasn't. I felt like he did a great job, and it wasn't. It didn't really feel strange to me or off. It kind of felt natural.
You phrase it in a great way by saying it's really God's story. And it has felt like that on our end where, we do a lot of different projects where we have to kind of drive the bus in a way and kind of manage it. And it's almost as if God was leading us and like, okay, I guess we're doing an actor. This makes sense. Well, we're going to have to find the right fit. And then he was the first submission, and it was just like
very first person.
Every step of the way, it's just been evident that, if you are doing it for God's glory, then no one's going to get in the way of his purposes, right? And so I think it's been a really cool experience for us even to steward, your testimony, but ultimately, like you said, God's story through you. So Jacob, your story is a story kind of centered around the theme of identity. And, there's a lot of different areas we can dive into this, but I'm just curious, in a general sense, how do you see that being relevant in culture today as a topical theme?
Yeah. Well, I'll actually kind of draw back to a moment when I met with Kurt and Glenn at Freedom and Faith, and identity was a big piece of what we had talked about that day. And this would have been over 2 years ago at this point. But Glenn had shared with me just the different influences that, and roles that can be a part of our identity. And so he talked about how culture can shift and shape our identity if we allow it to. And sometimes how our surroundings, like whether it's our family, our friends, or if we're younger at school, might shape our identity. But ultimately, the only one that can satisfy our identity is finding our identity in Christ. And I think even having grown up in the church, that was something that I never understood until 2 years ago. And so identity, I think, it's such an important thing for all of us to understand. We might not always find our identity in the right places or choose to find our identity in the right places. But I think just having the understanding of where our identity lies is so important. And so, yeah, I mean, I used to find my identity like in tennis, or, in tennis is if I'm winning, then I'm a winner. If I lose, then I'm a loser. And some of these things were subconscious. But as time went on, I started to understand that I was having an issue with that. And then if we kind of fast forward into the camp space, like finding identity and, I hosted a camp with this player, I hosted a camp with that player, and kind of finding the association as a piece of my identity. And it wasn't until I surrendered my life to Christ and understood that my identity is now a child of God that I found peace in my life.
What do we were talking about this kind of in prep for this interview. Like, I think this is like such a critical issue. I've told you a million times, like, your story is like so important, and that identity thing, and we kind of sum it up like a child of God, and like it almost sounds simplistic, right? But I think it's incredibly deep. Like, what practically does that mean to you, and how does it shape, I don't know, decisions that you make, how you think about yourself? Why is it so different?
At least for me, the root of the identity issue was pride. And I think really also, I mean, jealousy is a good word. When it comes to like seeking after the next biggest thing, or seeking after more. And that's a big part of my story is I was seeking after all these things, seeking after money, seeking after um, my lustful desires, seeking after so many different things of the world, but I wasn't seeking to draw closer to the Lord. And so eventually I got kind of broken down to this place of um, being having an understanding that like I cannot continue to live this life. And so I really had to like swallow my pride in a sense, and um, understand where I was in life, and um, be willing to drop those things of the world. And so, it hasn't been a perfect journey by any means. But I think just giving up to, looking at our desires, and from a practical standpoint, like what are we seeking after, and does this align with God's will for our life.
Yeah, and it's especially prevalent in, the sports world, right? Where you are so defined by your performance, like what your statistics are, like you said, record, am I a winner or am I a loser? I even think of name, image, and likeness, NIL, where it's quite literally, I'm selling my brand, my identity to companies to make money. And so it gets really convoluted when when you operate in a space where you are so defined by what you do and the sum of like your value to other people versus your innate value to God. So I mean, how have you seen that in sports in particular? I know we touched on this in the film, but I think there's even more depth there in the connotation of the sports world.
I think this goes for like whether you're in sports or business,
Right.
really any industry. When you're having all this success and you're at the peak of your career, it becomes so much harder to find a need in your life for the Lord. And so I think if you don't know the Lord, or if you're just kind of going through the motions, but you're experiencing all these highs in life, at that time I feel that it's hard for anyone to feel the need for Christ in that moment. Um, and so it really takes a humble heart. And so, like, to specifically address NIL, I think for a lot of these guys that are even 17 years old, they come onto campus. Suddenly they're the most popular student on campus at these large universities. They're making all this money. And so to them, they're being fed that, your identity is this as a football player and as someone who has it all. But inside, it's hard to know truly how they're feeling.
Yeah, it reminded me of the passage about it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Harder, for that to happen than the camel to go through the eye of a needle. Right, the need. You just don't recognize it. Right, you can find security right in these things like the wealth and success and yet they're fleeting. Something can happen and you get cut, as an athlete, right? And you get an injury, right? That's what happens so many times, right? Is you get an injury, and this is what happened to you in college, and all of a sudden you can't do the thing that you were. Like your identity is literally ripped away from you. Maybe follow up on that. Take us back. I mean, you were an athlete, college athlete. You talked about tennis already and identity. Is that the experience that happened for you at that time? I mean, we show that in the film, right? And if you haven't seen the film, go watch the film. All right. we usually try to stay at the top of this, but you had panic attacks, right? You said all these strange things. You literally thought you were dying, which is a really extreme kind of reaction. I think is the first way I think about it, but it just shows, I think, the importance of what we're talking about. Can you expound a bit more of that time in your own life?
Yeah. Leading up to the surgery, I noticed my heart was like pounding, and I was sometimes having what felt like a hard time breathing, and I had no idea what was going on. And then had a successful surgery, and that summer I was working down in Atlanta, Georgia. So I started my drive down there, and first thing that happened, I stopped at McDonald's to get a large Coke, and as they were passing it to me, I had these like really these like catastrophic thoughts, like, man, I think they poisoned my Coke, and I know it sounds bizarre, and it even felt bizarre, but it also at the same time it also felt real, and I was more confused than scared. Um, I just didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I continued on my drive, I can remember I was on a one lane road, or one lane on both sides. And suddenly I was feeling like the cars on the other side of the road were trying to hit me. And that's when I realized, like, okay, I'm having anxiety issues here. Like, something is wrong. Um, but those catastrophic thoughts just continued to creep in. And at the time, I just attributed it to, like, well, I can't work out, I can't play tennis. And so these thoughts are coming and this anxiety is happening simply because I can't play tennis. And I can't
Too
get,
much energy, right?
yeah, can't,
Yeah.
can't, can't
Didn't you
get my
say that
exercise
that
in.
was like a diagnosis or
From a
an
doctor?
explanation, at least a doctor had given you, that like you had been working out so much and now you can't? That's probably what's happening.
Yeah. I went to a couple different psychologists, and I went to the hospital 2 different times. And I think three out of the first time I went to the hospital, they said, oh, all your blood work looks good. Like, we can't find anything wrong. Then the next three visits, each time the doctor said, well, because your psyche or because your um, body has been thrown off physically, this is just something that's throwing off, being thrown off mentally, and it's just a part of recovering. And it was kind of just
Yeah.
chalked up to that. And it's like, well, that doesn't feel good to hear.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I met with Kurt and Glenn that Glenn kind of walked me through like what could have been happening at that time. And he said, like, do you think it might be possible that um, that all this was boiling up from things prior in your life? Or do you feel that it might be possible that all these things were boiling up because you're placing too much identity in tennis? And to me, it really felt like a light bulb had gone off, that I finally understood what was happening to me, 8 years prior.
Yeah, there's a lot more. I mean, and again, with the limits of the film, that Kurt scene in the film that everyone's familiar with is just one conversation that is kind of like a pivotal moment, or that illustration of the water bottle sticks out. But it's important to note that this has been a journey, and it's, we compressed it into 20 minutes, but those conversations were ongoing, and it's easy to watch the film and be like, yeah, that's clear. But when you're living it and going through the journey yourself, it's much more, I mean, I guess it's hindsight now, but as you're experiencing it, there's so many more conversations of discovery and what if this, or processing. And obviously the result of that was realizing that there was a lot of unsolved, I don't know if trauma is the right word, or just like, identity issues that kind of went back all the way to what you experienced early on in your childhood. So it's interesting to see the film. Cool. Yeah. All of these things in a row. It's great. But then to recognize this is over years of your life.
You made a great comment during the interview that we put in the film about how when you feel loved, you develop a sense of confidence, like a healthy sense of confidence. I thought like there's a lot behind that. Like, and we kind of put it in the context of when you had the kind of discovery about your dad's affair and how that was lost for you, and you thought he like cared and loved the other person more than he loved you. But it's a major kind of idea present in identity, right? Too, I think, and identity in Christ. Can you explain a bit more about that?
That's certainly one thought that is like really stuck with me from that difficult time in my life. Because growing up, I always felt very loved by, both my mom and dad, and still feel loved by my dad to this day. My parents are still together, and now have several grandchildren.
Worked
and
through
so
it.
it's been, I'm grateful that they're still together.
Praise God. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great part of the story. We didn't go into that, but yeah, I love that.
And so I do feel loved by my dad, just to be clear. But at the time when I was 13 years old, I I didn't know what to think. And that was something that came up into my head, is like, was there more love for that person than there was for me, my siblings, and my mom? And yeah, that really took a hit on my self-confidence. And um, again, I think it, as you mentioned, it translates to feeling loved, by God as believers. I think we have a sense of hope, a sense of eternal life with with the Lord in heaven. And I think having the understanding that He paid the price for our sins, He sent His Son to die on the cross, um, to pay a price that we deserve. I think that feeling of love from Him is really what drives most of us in our daily life. And again, it doesn't look perfect, but yeah, I think that sense of love and belonging to Him is critical.
And I think that idea of forgiveness was another theme that I think is tangential to the identity. Obviously forgiveness of, again, you felt unloved at the time and how you work through that. But then even like fast forward to, your college and post-college life of like, I am doing these things that I don't like, and you feel broken or unworthy of God's love because you're like, I believe in God, but I can't forgive myself. I can't, and again, it's like this twisting of identity where what you know about God's forgiveness towards you really impacts the confidence that you can live out your life from. I think the thing that the water bottle illustration really sticks out to me in the film is like, how could it be that like this is how I feel about myself and then this is how God sees me? Again, I think that's related to your understanding of Him, but also then allowing how He sees you to actually like permeate like your self-talk and the way that you see yourself. Like, again, that healthy sense of confidence and love where you almost have to like say, well, I do forgive myself for that because God does. And I have to like see myself as a loved child of God. I'm not perfect, right? But I don't know. Has forgiveness been a part of that journey for you, I guess, is maybe more the pointed question.
Yeah, it has. And leading up to the water bottle illustration, one thing that really stood out about that experience was I was able to understand how much the guilt and shame that I was really projecting onto myself, how much that was holding me back. Like it was like an 1,000-pound weight on my shoulders, and it just flipped into this cycle of sin, guilt, shame, and then the guilt and the shame would just lead back to sin. And I wasn't able to like forgive myself or understand that I made a mistake and I need to turn in a different direction.
Yeah.
It was just this constant cycle of sin.
Like you get to a place where you feel so bad, and so you got to do something to try to alleviate the feelings of feeling bad about yourself. But you know, I think that you make another poor decision, which just like leads to more feelings of guilt and.
Mm-hmm. And so, what really changed for me through forgiveness, not just of others, but also just forgiving myself, is I was no longer weighed down by that guilt and shame, and I was free to, you know, confess my sins and experience forgiveness, but also forgive myself. And I think one thing addressing like just kind of culture today is that a lot of times we might feel that we're not like the mistakes that we've made are too much, or you know, I've made so many choices that I'm not ready to follow Jesus or to accept him. And I think the idea of like, a lot of times we'll hear come as you are, but and that's a good thing. But I think it's important for all of us to understand that like we're not too far from God, and like he wants us to come to him today. He wants us to be, his child. And I think no matter where you're at in your life, just I hope that that, God loves you. God wants to have a relationship with you. And if you surrender, he will come into your heart and transform your life.
Another theme of the film that I think would be interesting to talk through with you is just the idea of being all in. So, we talked about the broader sense of identity, forgiveness being the journey there, but then that tipping point of, trying to bargain with God, God, I want your forgiveness and love, but am I willing to give up X, Y, or Z in my life? How is that relevant? I mean, today, in your life, I know this is definitely something that's convicting for me. Watching the film, it's like a daily thing. Lord, am I all in for you? But there was a tipping point where you realize like there was a contradiction between accepting that forgiveness and grace and then going to continue on and hold on to the things that you might be comfortable with.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of that bargain deal with God, and that was the place that I was at. I started to feel that I was having trouble with alcohol and that I might have an issue with it. And so I knew I needed to make a change, but I wasn't willing to give it up. So I just kind of made this deal like, okay, Lord, can you help heal me from alcohol? But I'm still going to drink once a week. And I actually found that to be more destructive than drinking frequently, because I was just waiting for that, Saturday to hit, and then it spiraled out of control. And but I do look back and view that as like, baby steps towards healing. It was a step in the right direction, and that helped me understand that. Actually, I have a book here. My mom gave me this book, and it says the title is "God Never Gives Up on You," and it's by Max Lucado, and it's actually the story of Jacob and when he was wrestling with God, and God wanted him to give up everything and surrender to him, and it turned into like this wrestling match, and eventually Jacob did submit to God, and his name was then changed to Israel. But what I was experiencing was just kind of that wrestling match in my life. And I think many of us go through that in different ways. And so eventually it was brought to this point of realizing I needed to surrender it all.
I guess even just in response to what you were saying about the Max Lucado book and God wanting all of you, that's where the namesake of the film, it's kind of a double meaning with like obviously your jealousy, but then really I think the primary theme is that God is jealous for you. God wants your whole heart. He wants your whole devotion. He doesn't want, 6 days of the week and then the seventh day you can have alcohol. No man can serve two masters. So I think that's just really obviously identity, but then God's jealousy for you as an identity.
Yeah. And we're not talking about alcohol drinking. I don't think that there's prohibition against alcohol per se, but we're talking about in the context of your story, right, of the abuse of that, and just, I guess, for clarification. But I thought that was a great moment. I remember that was like, we did multiple interviews with you, and they came up in the second interview where you talked about you were familiar with this concept of God being a jealous God, and that he wanted all of us, and that really is key, isn't it? Like it's not half-hearted. But when you do that, I know that's so scary for everybody because it feels like you're giving up so much, right? What do I have to give up? What do I have to give up? And I just think that's a really bad picture of who God is and his heart ultimately. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah.
of giving up, but getting? I mean, I don't know, not to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not that, and I personally, I don't believe that, alcohol is bad. And I just know for me, it keeps me from living my life in a way that's honoring to the Lord. And so the process, like after finally giving up alcohol and experiencing like the benefits that came from that for me personally, like I lost 25 pounds and I was starting to feel so much more energetic and suddenly my relationships with like my friends and my family and my girlfriend started healing and so initially it was mostly positive. And as time went on, it became hard and it's still hard. Whether it's like, going to a football game or hanging out with friends, it's still everywhere. It's still accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's still around me. And so sometimes I'm able to, reflect back and understand that, um, it's not attractive to me at all. And like, there's no temptation. And other times socially, there can be a lot of pressure and it can be
Mm-hmm.
hard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I really just have to, pray on it. A lot of times I'll pray for strength to be able to face that temptation. And the biggest thing is just being honest with the people around me. I've in the past, prior to a couple of years ago, I'd find myself like hiding or not telling the truth to those that love me, and that caused a lot of destruction. And um, as far as living out my life now today, I've found healing and just having people around me that can hold me accountable with that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And again, just for clarification, I think the idea isn't to pick on any one potential vice, but more the idea of something being used as a band-aid or as something that's like serving as your master. What is ruling your life? I mean, in the film, another thing that I know that you were dealing with was like the idea of being right through sports gambling. And, it's another way to just try and like numb the pain. Like I want to just focus on what I'm good at. Like, I mean, Carl and I talk about how you're kind of like a computer when it comes to sports stats and like, just the knowledge that you have in that. And so like, I could see that, being a really tempting thing to just be like, I'm going to pour myself into something that I know I'm good at, that I know really well. The idea of being right, knowing all the stats, and then, you can pick anything and it can be an idol,
Yeah.
Again, just reiterating that, like, yeah, alcohol, obviously a big one for many people, but, that's not necessarily the focus. On that note, sports gambling today is it's just getting more and more popular.
Massive, yeah.
What are your thoughts on it today? I'm just curious. I know that like the idea of like, these big apps and like it's so accessible and there's different laws in different states, but it's a little different than a friendly wager maybe with friends.
It's not just like, the outcome of a game, right? It's like in-game kind of stuff. It's just constantly, a chance to like up the ante or, you can just do it all the time, right? I mean, yeah, to your question. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm just curious today, like what you think about it, in general.
Yeah. Well, it's very dangerous. And I think for people that have like an addictive personality, like I know that tend to have an addictive personality. It's a very slippery slope. And so it's very difficult. And I think again, for those that have an addictive personality, it can lead to mass destruction. I was reading an article a couple of years ago that was talking about sports gambling and shared there's very few ways that you can ruin your life by sitting at the kitchen table, but sports gambling is one. He was talking about a young person that gambled their entire life savings just right there at the kitchen table. And the other tricky part with it is the people around you, like it's pretty easy for no one to know, because it's all right at your fingertips and on your own phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess to answer your question, like generally, I just feel that sports gambling is dangerous, and I think it's too bad that a lot of states have made it legal
Yeah.
without much parameter. But unfortunately, there's a lot of money involved with it, and
Oh yeah.
I don't see it changing much.
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about kind of how this, again, we kind of just end the story where we end it, but what happened after you made some of these decisions. You changed the way that your relationship with God and your identity, and worked to kind of rebuild trust with your girlfriend. I want to talk about the walk and kind of your response to like, okay, well, I've had this platform, I have this experience. Now what can I do differently? So yeah, what was that like, in terms of the walk and everything that came after that we didn't really even touch on in the film?
Yeah. So for context, one thing that I prayed on was to find Christian friends, because I knew that I needed to shift my social circle a little bit to truly follow the Lord. And so I was praying on that, and I didn't know what would come of it. But a couple weeks after praying on that, I had hosted a few camps with Travion Henderson, he was the running back at Ohio State, and now he's with the Patriots. And I'd recently had a camp with him. I saw the joy of the Lord in his life and what that looked like at this youth football camp. And something about that camp, like I almost feel like the Spirit was like kind of grabbing my attention in that moment, because I noticed like something very different about him, and it really stuck with me. So I reached out to him, and we shared our stories, and um, ultimately shared that God, he wanted to share with other people what God was doing in his life. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with the Walk or the Walk Foundation, it serves as a platform for athletes to share about their faith in Jesus. And so Trey ended up being the first one we had on the podcast, but since then we've interviewed over 70 athletes about their faith in Jesus, and they've just shared their faith journey, and it's really been amazing. It's been amazing to see the spiritual maturity of these young athletes, and just their desire to share with others what the Lord has done in their life. So it's been a blessing to start the Walk Foundation and continue to work with it. Um, there's so many athletes. I feel like God is working in many different spaces right now, and sports is certainly one of them, and working through athletes that have a big platform to try to lead their fans and their communities to the Lord. But it's exciting to look ahead and see what might come of the walk.
How did your passion for that kind of develop? And I know you're teaching today too. It just seems like that might have been a found passion. Where did that come from?
Yeah, my passion to work and help kids with tennis was, I started playing tennis when I was a sophomore in high school, and there was a coach who was actually briefly in the film, that he's had a lot of success and developed a lot of the best tennis players in Ohio. And he approached me, and after a tennis tournament, really took me under his wing, even though I wasn't playing for his team, and just really poured into my life. And that really helped build up my self-esteem and the image that I had of myself. And again, it kind of led into, once I was having success with tennis, finding identity there. But I was so grateful for that coach pouring into me and what that meant for my life, that um, when I went to college, I decided to study business and sports management, with the idea of coaching tennis professionally, and then eventually had the desire to own a business. And so it's kind of a marriage of two passions, like one working with kids, and then two on the business side of things. And so as I was in the tennis industry and running these large summer camps and working with kids, it was great to be able to try to pour into their lives with the vehicle being tennis. And when NIL hit, I just saw this opportunity of like, I could take this camp model that I'm using with tennis camps and do the same thing with football and basketball camps. And I had always been a big college sports fan. And so I felt like there was a big market for it. And that's kind of what led into that camps business.
And then today, like, it's cool to see how the Lord has used that passion and kind of said, well, give that to me, and the walk in terms of, these events and camps, still pouring into these kids, but with a different focus. Obviously developing skills is great, but the bigger focus being like teaching them about God, and reaching out to them in that way. So that's really cool to kind of see how God was weaving that passion in you through that coach in high school. And then now today, how he's using that for his kingdom.
Yeah. I as we were doing the film, it just kind of hit me that in addition to what you had said there, like, it's almost like, God had given you your calling early on in working with kids and doing the tennis related camps, and this NIL kind of thing hit, and I don't know if I would go and say it was a distraction or it became what it was, right? But kind of going full circle to where you are today, you're like back working with kids and in the tennis industry, and all this experience now that you can bring into that, and as well as the walk, which is another great thing that's come out of that. And
it wasn't a waste.
Yeah, like I just think that's really cool. Like the full circle, and like maybe the seeds were there early on and didn't realize it as much, and then you kind of go through all this stuff and trying to, whether it's make money or identity or feel good, and you realize like, oh, this is my calling. This is where I really can add value. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any reflections off of that, but
well, I think you're correct about, like, just kind of, even as a young kid, like the passion for sports, how even though I didn't understand it at the time, like that was leading up to the Walk Foundation, I believe. And I can remember at the beginning of the camp's business and the beginning of NIL, I was thinking like, why is God allowing like the tennis guy from Mansfield to like have all of these connections and these relationships with some of the top football and basketball players in the country? And at the start of those thoughts, I used to think I was doing something special, or that it was me who was creating this. But as time went on and the Walk Foundation started, I was really able to understand that the camps were never about me. The camps were never about like creating this big business, even though at the time that's what I thought it was for. I thought the purpose was like I would create this big business and be very successful and have all these things. And eventually, through the birth of the Walk Foundation and athletes sharing about their faith, I realized that the camps were never about the business or about the money. I really believe that um, that God has revealed that it wasn't about those things. It was really about pouring into kids at that time, but also developing relationships with athletes for them to give the glory and honor to the Lord. And so I'm so grateful. As hard as things were from time to time, I'm grateful that had those opportunities, and now that through the podcast and through camps that are Christ have or faith centered football camps, basketball camps to this day, it makes me really grateful for even the hard times.
So you are running a few camps now. Like that was kind of at that point the business, you really had shut it down. But you're doing a handful of camps now that are really faith based and in their orientation, I guess you can say.
Yes. So last summer, the Walk Foundation put on 4 different youth football camps. And so it was a similar structure to the camps that I'd run in the past with the business. It's just that the financial structure was completely different. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of having an athlete fee and charging kids $150 per camper, the camps were held in underserved communities and were free for the kids. Um, and also the athletes volunteer their time instead of accepting an NIL fee, which is what allowed all of it to be possible. So these
Yeah.
camps in underserved communities,
remarkable.
kids would receive a meal, a custom backpack, a Bible, and a Bible reading guide. And so, um, yeah, it's been really cool. And even looking ahead to this summer, we're planning a few football camps with the Walk Foundation. So it's cool to see how God is, you know, really shifted those camps into something that could shine a light in these communities.
Yeah.
Where's the best place to, like, if people want to check that out, to go, is your website or a certain platform kind of the best place to see your work or get involved?
Yeah. So we do have a website, bivouacfoundation.org. And then on social media, our handle is at Access the Walk. And there you can see all of our short media clips. And then the long form interviews are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. If you search the Rooahk Podcast.
Super cool and super critical in reaching kids at such a young age. And then these people that they look up to, right? And then as our society and culture does, these athletes that are superstars, and them coming and bringing it full circle here, maybe, right? And like it's not about the sports and the money and the performance, like the life is really found in being in connection with God and finding your worth and identity there. Like, and so you guys are pouring that into kids early on, which is fantastic.
Yeah. It's so cool to see, Jacob, just how God has used every part of your life to just orchestrate His glory, and He does that in all of our lives. I think willing or unwilling, like God will have His glory, and it's so cool to see that, even in times where we feel lost or we struggle, as obviously your story depicts, that like all of those different things are just being used as a broken vessel to give glory to God. So I think that's a beautiful place to end today.
Yeah.
And really excited to see the Rooahk Foundation continue to grow. And that's so awesome to hear, everything that you're working on with that as well. So,
and thank you for being willing to share your story and be vulnerable. I know throughout this whole process, there were times where maybe I pushed you a little bit or we did, but I know that your heart continued to be surrendered and you wanted to do it for the right reasons. And you always expressed, if the Lord can use it, then, I'm willing to do that. So, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for all the work that you and your team put into it. And if you haven't watched the movie yet, I would encourage you to do so. It's really, you guys did a great job of making it pretty powerful.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Rooahk.